The truth is out there. Knowledge is power. This is the Prepper Podcast Radio Network. Are you storing food? Many preppers are storing food for months and years, but only have enough fuel stored for days or weeks. Stretch your fuel storage by harnessing the power of the sun with a sun oven. Food can be baked, boiled, or steamed at temperatures of 360 to 400 degrees Fahrenheit with the power of the sun. Depending on where you are located, you can use the sun for 50 to 80% of your cooking, allowing you to preserve your fuel storage for rainy days. Sun-baked foods stay moister and have less shrinkage and don't burn. Sun-baked roasts are tastier and more succulent, and sun-baked bread has unparalleled taste and texture. Water can be heated in a sun oven for purification or personal hygiene. For the past 25 years, sun ovens have been proudly made in the U.S. They are durable, have a long life, and come with a 100% satisfaction guarantee. For a discount coupon, email podcast@sunoven.com. That's podcast@sunoven.com. Pioneer Living Survive, a true people publication, and online at www.pioneerliving.net. Here you'll find ideas and tips for people, the new pioneers, homesteaders, survivalists, and preppers who want to get back to basics and work with nature. It's our goal at Pioneer Living to inform as many people as possible with solutions on the forgotten, lost art of basic human survival. Pioneer Living is currently accepting articles for those of you who wish to share stories on the pioneer way of life, including homesteading, survival, gardening, preparedness, and simple back-to-basics living. By visiting pioneerliving.net, you'll learn how to build an open fire pit for cooking, making charcoal, tanning hides, survival food storage, survival canning and preserving, survivalist gardening, organic soil prep, and composting. In these unique and extraordinary times, now is the time to practice a self-sufficient way of life. Find us online at pioneerliving.net and start changing your life today.
Something is coming. Change.
This is KPRN-DB, broadcasting worldwide from Southeast Oklahoma, USA, to parts unknown.
One thing I wanted to get to, and there's still more we could probably talk about with water, but one thing I kind of wanted to back up a little bit, and because this is all, again, things that we can do on a budget. Really the fact that I want to really try to hammer home that you don't have to have a huge budget in order to become prepared. And a lot of people, I think, get turned off when they go to websites and read books and stuff, and it's like, you do some of the stuff that people describe doing, it's like, well, yeah, if you had $1 million, if you had $1 million, you might be able to do that, or at least several $100,000, you might be able to do that in the homestead and the bunkers and all the stuff, and storing up all the stuff and buying stuff. But I think it's very it's very misleading, because I think what you can do is if you have a good plan and you take care of the basics first, and like I said, we start with a small amount first, the 72-hour thing, and if you're just consistent with it, if you had $50 a month to put into it, even if you had $20 a month to put into it, that you just try to do that consistently. If you're really into this stuff and you really feel this is important, and I hope you do, if you're listening to this, then you just take a little bit out every month, and maybe, you buy, like we were talking about, the water stuff is what you get going first, and then maybe you're getting a little bit of food, and maybe you're getting a little bit of ammo and guns, that type of thing together, or saving up money so that you've got, some kind of self-defense, in case you need it. So all of these different things. But beyond even talking about spending money, I just wanted to talk briefly about some of the things you can do that don't cost any money at all. And of course, one of those that's a huge topic that we could talk about for days is skills. And I'm not going to really get into that, because, of course, that's what the Human Path School is all about, and what Paul's teaching out there, and I'm teaching, and Gloria, and all the people that are teaching these skills. And, of course, there's other schools besides ours teaching skills like these too. Just none of them nearly as well, of course. But, yeah. But the other thing that you can do is I think is really important is just to understand strategically your location. You need to know what your location is, and you need to know all about that. And I think a lot of people go through life not really doing that. When they move into a place, they don't really know where they live. And one of the exercises, let me give you an example. One of the exercises I like to do with the scouts in level 1 is to make them map out what I do is I make them map out their neighborhood in a 1 mile radius. So their house is the center, wherever they live is the center, and then they've got half mile radius, so 1 mile diameter, so half mile radius. And then I want them to find, if I want to say, okay, I want you to imagine you are a large animal, like a coyote, or, a wild animal, like a coyote or a fox, but, even bigger than that, maybe a mountain lion, and you had to get from one end of that radius, that's a 1 mile diameter, to the other end. Okay, in the middle of it passes through your house, right, or passes by your house. How would you do that? So what that does is that forces people to get earlier what I used to do before the days of the internet was if I was new in a place, I would get out every map there was, and I would find out, okay, where are the green belts at? Where are the ponds at? Where are the trails at? Where are the back? And of course, as well as I do, if you've spent any time out in your backyard, there's alleyways, there's broken fences, there's all kinds of things that you never even discover until you get out there and explore it a little bit. And so this is a really important concept, and this is really, I think, a valid and a very valuable aspect of being in the city, especially, and being prepared, or anywhere really, but especially in the city. It's very crucial that you understand your location, all of the weaknesses and strengths, and how to get out if you had to, and where people might come in, whether it was for help or whether it was for people that might want to, take what you've got, but you're just much more aware. And I guess I always say adaptability and awareness are the two biggest survival skills you could possibly learn. So there's a lot of little things like this you can do, and I just wanted to interject this as one of them, but this is one of those free, tips and free gimmies that you don't have to have any money at all for.
Right. And, one of the things that we teach our students is edible plants in an urban environment. And a lot of those plants, people think, oh, well, that's a poisonous plant, but with the proper identification, it's not a poisonous plant and ripe for the gathering, which will extend any food supply that you have way farther. And then, of course, everybody that's got the little water gardens, that's an invaluable source of water, and a lot of the water garden plants are edible. So that's another thing. I think it's real important for everybody to be aware and to start thinking, well, can I go this way, or can I do this thing? And run little scenarios through your mind.
Absolutely. I think that's very, very important. And I wanted to add on to that. We were talking about edible plants. A lot of times you find more edible plants in the city than you do out in the woods. And the reason for that is, especially depending on the weather and the type of year, but like right now with the drought we've had, you're really hard-pressed to find anything above ground that's within browse, or graze level for any of the wildlife out there that isn't already eaten. And in the city, there's usually a lot of other choices. So you don't have the squirrels out there eating the Texas persimmons before they even get ripe, and you don't have a lot of the stuff that would normally be competing for a lot of the fruits and stuff that's out there, depending on the season. You don't have as much in the city because they're living off of human trash and garbage and food, that's left over and spilling over from garbage cans. I mean, most squirrels in the city are really just kind of glorified rats that are out there eating, garbage, because it's much easier for them to do that. And it's usually they get a lot more of it too.
That's true. One of the other things is keeping your vehicle prepared. We teach all of our students to just bite the bullet and go down and buy a gallon of that Coffman fuel, which is a sealed metal 1 gallon can, and you can buy a little what they call an oil spout that actually screws right on that or any other oil of the plastic oil cans, and that's an extra gallon of fuel either for your car or for cooking or whatever other use that you might have for it. And just thinking of little things like that, having a toolkit in your car, even no matter how cheap or how small it looks, it's certainly going to be better than nothing.
Absolutely. And let's move into that. I mean, we hit on water pretty well, and we'll probably get back over to food, and we talked a little bit about strategy, but let's talk about transportation and getting out of Dodge if you have to, and maybe we'll come back around to bug out bags and such later. Now, we'll just kind of see how much we get with this first. We're just going to kind of talk for probably about an hour here or so, or whatever time feels right to stop, and then we'll probably divide that up a little and put that out in parts, because it makes it a little easier to digest, I think, on the listener's end. But let's move into you gotta get out of Dodge one way or another. What are your options and how are you keeping those open? So we've got foot, right? I mean, you can move by foot. We've got bicycle. We've got I suppose if you're in an area where you've got horses, you've got those, of course, and then you've got automobiles, you've got motorcycles, scooters. All of those are kind of your options. And so if you're just talking about your own options that you can take care of, what I would suggest is that you at least think about those first three, assuming that you have these, that you think about, what you're doing on foot. And that means, and that's something to think about. It doesn't mean just think, oh, yeah, I'll just go out and I'll walk 15 miles, no problem. I mean, there's a lot to take into account there. There's, number one, getting into shape and knowing that you can walk 15 miles today and then wake up tomorrow and walk another 15 miles. And then number two, that you're wearing the right kind of foot gear and you've got the right kind of foot gear, because believe me, that is much more important than you think. And the three, that you've got the right clothing for that, because believe me, getting chafed thighs, for instance, that get infected and you end up getting cellulitis will stop you just as fast as getting a horrible thorn stuck through your foot. The same idea. So you've got to take care of all of those things, and there's more. I mean, then you got to carry stuff with you. So do you have the right kind of backpack? That you can do that. Have you tried that? Can you take your water with you? So there's all the stuff that goes with the foot travel. And I'm not saying we're going to get into that now, but I just wanted to bring that up as kind of an overview. And then there's all the stuff to deal with bikes, because I think a bicycle is something that pretty much everybody has, even if you're in apartments. In fact, if you are in the city, you might use a bike a lot more than you use a car. So plan your bicycle material, all of your bicycle resources out, and have them there. Have your spare tires. Always have that stuff there, so that you don't, so you're not dead in the water when something happens. And then, of course, we move on up to the car, and the car is, we can talk about that for a long time too. I just kind of want to intro that. Go ahead, Paul.
Back to the bicycles. If you'll Google up some images of what the Viet Minh did with bicycles in the Vietnam conflict, you'll see some incredible sights. I've seen personally like 500 pounds on a standard bicycle, and they had a little side lever that they held in one hand, and then it held on the other handlebars, and they transported stuff hundreds of miles down the Ho Chi Minh Trail with just stupid little bicycles. And so don't discount, a bicycle for getting out of Dodge, whether you're riding it with a backpack on or you're trying to haul a lot of food and water and stuff. They're incredible machines.
Absolutely. Something you can always kind of look at, I think, for this too, is how homeless people live a lot of times. Those that are, especially homeless people that aren't homeless so much because of alcoholism or drugs, but people that are really homeless either because of their own choice and they want to be, and it's just that's how they choose to live, or they just they're on hard luck, but they're pretty handy and they know how to adapt. Because you'll generally find that they have a bicycle and they have a trailer on the bicycle and they're pulling stuff around. A lot of times they'll have a dog, and so I mean all those things. It's kind of interesting to watch how people live like that. I was going to mention briefly. Paul used to do a thing that I think is really fascinating, and I would love to do eventually at the Human Path, is more of kind of a scenario/competition, was the Great Hobo Challenge, And do you want to talk about that Hobo Challenge at all, Paul?
Well, it actually started out as a joke. I had a couple of homeless veterans living on my place up in Burnett, and they got to discussing one Sunday about how good of hobos they were, that how good they could live off the land, and so it became a challenge. And so we divided them up, and they couldn't have any money to start with, and they couldn't bum off friends. And so they had to, panhandle off the corners, or they had to dumpster dive or get things however they could. And these were two pretty well different individuals, but they had both been on the road for several years. And it was kind of late fall, it wasn't really freezing, but it was getting pretty cool. And we took one of them to one town and one of them to the other. And in about 3 days, the first one called me up. This was a week-long challenge. He called me up and he said, please come get me. I haven't slept in 2-3 days and I'm freezing. I've been sleeping behind a dumpster. So, we went and picked the guy up, and the last guy called me up on the 6th day. And he said, is the gooseneck trailer empty? And I said, well, yeah. And he goes, well, come down tomorrow and bring the gooseneck trailer. So he said, I've got a lot of stuff. Well, he had actually scrounged enough lumber and enough material to build a 10 by 12 homeless, what we call the homeless shelter, complete with windows and a door. And not only that, but he had about a week's supply of food, and I think it was $187 in cash and 2 cases of beer. So in a week's time, that was fairly incredible. Well, then, of course, I was laughing about it and cutting up with them. They said, well, can you do it? And I thought, can I do that? I said, well, I've got all these things I'm doing, so you got to give me 30 days to get everything in order. And so I went down and did the same thing. And I said, I'm going to take a little longer than a week. I'm going to go, a couple of 3 weeks. And they said, oh, yeah, you'll be calling in 2 or 3 days. Well, I had a plan. I showed up at the local thrift store where they dumped me off in town and, gave this lady a sob story. Well, my lady threw me out and, I need a sleeping bag. And I'll sweep the floor and, clean the toilet and clean the sink and all of that. And she goes, oh, yeah. So anyhow, I had me a sleeping bag for the first night. And she took pity on me and let me sleep on the back porch because it looked like rain. And just before she left, she put the coffee pot on the outside so I'd have hot coffee in the morning. And I got a job working in a local restaurant. Now, I've washed dishes before in my life, even though I'm a PhD. And I knew that if I could get a dishwasher's job, it's going to be really lucrative. And so what I was looking for was a restaurant that was kind of upscale and did the tip sharing for the busboys and for the people back in the back washing dishes. And I found one that was really upscale. And the bonus to that was it had a washing machine and dryer because they had linens on the table, and it had a nice shower. So now, even though I was living on the back porch of the thrift store, I had a place to take a shower and had a place to wash my clothes. And, of course, in a restaurant, people are always sending stuff back, especially in an upscale restaurant. And so now I had tons of food to eat because they didn't just scrape it off. They just stacked them up under the warming lamp. Well, make a long story short, in 2.5 weeks, I had enough to buy a U.S. mail Jeep for $500. And so now I had a place to sleep that was really out of the weather because you can take that spare tray out of the side, and for somebody that's not 6 foot tall, and I'm not, I had to do a little jiggling of things around, but I made a really nice bed in there. And then I found a trailer for $50, and I had to swap tires around on it. So now I had a trailer, and I was dumpster diving all this time, and I was diving for specific articles that I knew would sell at the flea market. And I quit my job after 3 weeks and went to Canton, Texas, and sold all the stuff that I'd been dumpster diving for 3 weeks for. And I had about $1,800 in my pocket. And I thought, just to make everybody feel bad, I'm going to go out to this guy that had the dented canned goods and the expiration date food, big warehouse. And I said, well, I want to load my Jeep up, and my trailer, and how much will it cost me? And he quoted me, it was like, I don't know, $80 to load both of them up to the ceiling. And but he said, look, go sell stuff for me. I said, man, I don't want to sell stuff on the side of the road. Well, anyhow, he talked me into it, and he said, I guarantee you'll be back before 5. And each and every day I was back before 5. His guarantee to me was he would buy everything back. Anyhow, so I spent 2 weeks doing that, and when I arrived at home, I had $5,000. I had a Jeep, and I had a trailer full of food, and, of course, it took me almost 2 months to do that. But that's pretty good to have that much money in your pocket.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it would be a challenge. I think Gloria really wants to do that. I think she's, being a girl, she's a little afraid of trying to sleep out on the back porch of the thrift store, but then I don't blame. Right. And it is a rough life, but it can be done, for people down and out on their luck. Don't worry about it. Just think about what you're doing and get a plan and do it.
Well, I think it's a great way if you're in an urban area, and I used to do this too, not nearly to the extent that you talked about, but I used to go and live, sleep on the street, live like a homeless, but I had my own gear with me. I'd have a backpack, and I had my own food and some kind of water purification. So it was really more like just, urban camping really is the way where I saw it. And my point was that I learned a lot about the city. At the time, it was very easy. It was much you see the city through totally different eyes. You know, you see what I was talking about earlier. If you're mapping out where your home is and getting, you know, if there was an animal that had to go from one side to the other, that's kind of what you do. I mean, you spend a lot of time looking for things you never thought you'd look for. You know, trees that hang down real low that you could, you know, pine trees that you can camp under even if it's snowing, and you got, and you know, of course, viaducts and bridges are all the natural, what everybody kind of looks to or thinks about. But you know, you got to be careful with security. You can't just hang out where everybody else is homeless too. So there's all that aspect to it, and then of course there's the huge social aspect to it. And I think it's just a really good exercise. I think that would be a great thing to do as a challenge, you know, just like a bug out bag challenge, to do like a homeless challenge, so that people really, I think, number one, they gain a huge amount of understanding for what homeless people actually do go through. And I think that's something everybody needs to learn, and how much we take for granted the things that we do have. And number two, it makes you a hell of a lot better at adapting and surviving.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, in a situation like that, you know, you never pass a dumpster without looking in, because you can come up with some pretty good items. I found a lamp set one time, and I thought, well, you know, I can get a couple of bucks off that. Well, come to find out, it was like a $500 lamp set, and they gave me $75 for it. So, you know, there's some things you really just kind of need to be aware of and watch. And a lot of times, you know, behind restaurants and stuff, they will throw out actually perfectly good food, like a ham. I found a ham or two that was still cold and still in the vacuum packed, you know, heavy plastic wrapper, and it was just out of date. There was nothing wrong with ham. It would just become out of date. Well, that was a pretty good feast. You know?
Absolutely, and stores will do that a lot. I mean, when of course, sometimes I go to the employees that want it, but my wife used to manage a health food store in a little town we lived in, and she always got the stuff they were throwing out, and it was good food. I mean, we ate really well. We were very poor at that time, and the one thing we had is we always had good food. It was healthy food.
Right. And, you know, of course, places like H-E-B don't throw their food out in accessible dumpsters now. They compact it and ship it off wherever. But little stores, like in little small towns, don't do that. They throw that stuff straight in the dumpster, and you can talk to them and say, well, look, I'll come by every day, and if you'll just put this box of food over here by these crates, I'll go through it, take what I want, and I'll throw the rest in the dumpster. Well, once you establish that you are going to do that, oh, my goodness, you know, I mean, just because a mango has a little dark spot on the outside, or bananas get a dark spot, so what? It's great food.
Absolutely, and I really kind of get you in touch with, you know, kind of again how our consumer market works, you know, and how we, you know, we really are that way. You know, there are a lot of places in the world where that would not be the case. You know, I worked on the East-West German border for a long time, my first time in the military, and one of the things that we did was we'd always translate these reports, you know, people that would be interviewed coming across, and I remember all the time, you know, hearing from East Germans how, I mean, they would stand in line for hours just to get these moldy oranges that came from Cuba or wherever, you know, and it was just, you know, their idea of fresh, to come over to the east, or to the west, and to be able to walk into a store, and these were, you know, West German stores really were nothing even at the time compared to the amount of choice you'd get in an American supermarket. But even just that difference, you know, the amount of choices would just literally dumbfound them, you know, with all of the things that were available. So we really take a lot for granted here in this country, you know.
Yeah, and, you know, I've been on the road several times back in my younger days, and, you know, you plan a trip out, and all of a sudden the gas prices double. I'll never forget when the gasoline went from 47 cents to 75 cents. And I was on the road, and I was on a budget, and I knew exactly how much gas it took me to get from the Panhandle of Texas to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Well, I got about halfway back and ran out of money. And I would just walk into a grocery store and just go up to the manager and say, you know, I'm on the road, I'm hungry, you know, I'm not asking for a handout. Let me sweep the back and empty the trash cans, and how about giving me a bag of beans? Well, they were just fell all over themselves, you know. And usually the guys slip you a couple of bucks. Well, make a long story short, it took me 2 weeks to get back home instead of 3 days, but I did make it back home.
We're going to divide this discussion up into several more digestible pieces of about 20 to 30 minutes each. So this is the end of this particular part, and we will pick it back up tomorrow or the next weekday. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so all of these things are things that don't have anything to do with money. In fact, they have to do with not having any money. So, again, back to kind of the main point of this discussion, which was urban readiness and urban preparedness. There's just I think there's a huge kind of disconnect from a lot of people when they get into they want to be prepared. And so the first thing almost everybody does these days, because we all have an internet connection, or if you don't, you go to the library or whatever. But they get online, and there's just this massive amount of information, and I talked about this in my last podcast about the huge market that there is now for all of this stuff, and buying your ready-made food and hybrid seeds and all the stuff that there is, and it's almost overwhelming again with all these choices. Well, I guess I'm here to say, and I think Paul probably agree with me, that it doesn't have to be that way. You can think about the fact that all of the things that you really need in terms of food and everything you've already got. You're already buying your food, all that. All you have to do is just do a little bit more and just learn just a little bit more. You learn a little bit about food preservation, learn a little bit about storing your water like we talked about, and just a little bit at a time. And then there's the things that are free of just learning about your own neighborhood. And then there's the stuff that's more social that, you start thinking, wow, I didn't even think about that. You probably, many of you that'll hear this probably never would have thought about the idea open to you of just going into a store and talking to, the manager and saying, hey, I'll sweep the back of your storeroom there for just a little bit of food. Another example of that is just tonight. I was walking out from work and I saw this guy with a homeless guy look like, with a duffel bag on his back and a dog, and the dog was obviously really thirsty and very hot, and so I don't usually do this, but this was just one of those times where it's like, I don't say I don't usually do this, but I generally don't give things to homeless people who come up and ask for them because I don't really know if they're sincere or not. But this guy, I could tell needed help, and so I just went over to him and said, hey, what's up? And so it turned out he's trying to get back to Denver. He had some bad luck, and he was down here, and he was actually a Hurricane Katrina victim from years before, and he has a place to stay up in Denver. So long story short, I saw that as you know, I'm kind of big on taking care of dogs, and I drove him up to what he needed. He needed to get out of he had been sleeping under viaducts and stuff for a couple of weeks, and he just needed to get out of town because the cops had been telling him you can't do that anymore. You've got to get out of here. So he was going to walk to the nearest truck stop. Well, the nearest truck stop is about it's about 60 miles away, and he was willing to do that, but obviously, I don't think he would have made it, and so I don't think his dog would have. So, I loaded him in the car and his dog in the car, and I drove him up to the nearest truck stop and dropped him off. And now the reason I'm telling the story is because this guy who was, he's kind of used to living, I don't think he's homeless. He supposedly has a home in Denver and everything, but he's used to that. He had no problem with getting that ride to the truck stop because he knew when he got to the truck stop, he was going to be able to find a trucker who would be willing to take him and his dog. And he said, well, I'll probably have to do some work of some sort, but whatever it is, I'm happy to do it. I'm not asking for a handout. And so I'm not going to tell you for sure, but I would put my money on the fact that guy's probably going to be in Denver in about 3 days,
Yeah, and, it's really strange. In the last 3-4 days, we've been doing the same thing. I accidentally ran across a guy that was getting out of the Army on a medical, and probably the Army wasn't doing right by him, but who really knows? And he was selling all of his uniforms. And so I said, yeah, I'll buy them because a lot of the surplus stores won't buy them. And, they were the urban camouflage, the digital camouflage. And I said, sure. Well, he calls back and he goes, well, I got some buddies getting out too, and could you use some boots and whatever. I'll make a long story short. Over the past week, we've bought 30 sets of fatigues, mostly in the sizes that we can use, for like a ridiculous price of about $10 a set. And the boots were $5 each. Well, the boots don't fit me, but they'll fit somebody, somebody in our extended family. And this last haul, went over, and I was looking under the carport there at the apartments, and there was an old M151 Jeep sitting there, and I said, man, that's pretty neat. Who belongs to that? He goes, well, I do. You know, it doesn't run. I don't have a title. And I said, yeah, really? He goes, yeah. I said, what do you want for it? $250. So I'm now the proud owner of an M151. somehow I'm going to get a title of that thing. You know, it's going to take some work, but you know, I mean, that's just the things that you run across if you're just being alert. And you know, I would never run across that deal if I hadn't been there. You know, kind of doing the guy a favor. I mean, he's down on his luck, and hey, we can use the stuff.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think that's kind of maybe the lesson to take from this part of the discussion is, you know, to like you said, you know, just being alert and really paying attention to your social surroundings and your urban surroundings is a really big part of that urban awareness that you need in preparedness. And so, you know, again, I mean, this isn't just about, you know, a blog of somebody saying, yeah, you need to buy a lot of beans, and yeah, you need to dry your food, you got to get an Excalibur, and you got, you know, all the things you got to do, you know, that you got to buy. And it's not really about that as much as it is about just paying attention. And a lot of times you'll find this stuff, and I think you find, just like it is, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon, and I don't know what it is, and this gets into a little more maybe of the energetic side of life than I really, you know, would want to talk about in depth here. But you find that the things you need a lot of times, if you're just aware and you're really going through life, being a little more aware of what's around you, the things you need just kind of pop up almost like street signs here and there. And I used to find it all the time. Well, I still do, but I used to notice it in the woods, you know, when I'd be hungry and I'd be like, God, I'd really be nice to you know, to be able to find such and such. Or I sure wish that this was around, but I haven't seen any. I come around the next, you know, half mile around the corner on wherever I'm at, and there's all of a sudden that plant that I needed to eat, or whatever it would have been, or some water. You know, those things tended to be that way in the wild, and I think those things tend to be that way anywhere, whether it's amongst humans in an urban area or not. It's just a matter of how alert and aware we are of our surroundings and how we kind of interact with that, rather than being, you know, kind of stuck in our own, you know, in our own world. Yeah,
I agree. One of our mutual friends, which I won't divulge his name, I guess it was several months ago, he calls up and he goes, you know, my wife found this wonderful deal in the grocery store. And he said, I don't know what to think. He said, they're selling cans of cream corn. And I said, yeah. And he goes, yeah, they're like 12 for $1. No, you're kidding me. And he goes, no. And so we went up and bought half a case. Anyhow, the other part of that story is now his wife doesn't particularly work, and he does, and now they are couponing and doing unbelievable deals. Well, I'm not patient enough to flip coupons, but they are, and I think that cut their food bill down to $10 or $15 a month.
Wow.
You know, that's another thing, being aware of, you know, your surroundings. And so, you know, not only is her full-time job, you know, raising kids, but her full-time job now is to procure the food. And, you know, she'll call us up every once in a while, hey, there's this wonderful deal, you know. And, oh, yeah, we'll go right down and take care of it. So,
well, and that's a really good point, actually.
You know, and if you keep your mind clear and say, well, you know, I can do this, and you just do it.
I agree, and I think you brought up another good point I was just going to mention was a lot of times, you know, for those of you that have spouses and significant others and they're doing this as a team, you know, you're really kind of being into preparedness in that way. You know, you want to make sure you kind of subdivide the tasks out and delegate. You know, not necessarily delegate, but you know, take something that you like. So if one of you really likes to take, like my wife, she loves to cook, she loves to prepare the food, she loves to deal with the food. And so that's what she does, you know, in terms of the preparedness for food. She does all of that, so I don't have to, you know. So you know, work as a team on this stuff too, and that really helps cut down the amount of work and the amount of effort that you have to put into everything that you're doing to be prepared.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, there's all kinds of bargains out there if you're just looking. One of the things is HEB is selling their canned goods now with a $2 off coupon, and so you know, you can have really primo food storage containers, like if you're dehydrating or doing something like that, for an extremely reasonable price.
Which are you talking about for food containers?
HEB. Normally, HEB sells their canned goods, their canning jars and their lids and everything.
Canning stuff.
It's a seasonal thing. But now they're selling it year-round. Like even Walmart has gone to year-round selling because there's more and more people are gardening, and more people are buying bulk and canning it up and saving a lot of money. But anyhow, they've got their jars on special right now, I think, for $2 off a case, which puts them in the real realm of affordable.
Right. Yeah, mason jars are really for home food preservation, and for me, for my herbs, for medicinal plants, and they're just really absolutely crucial. They're such a huge and great way to store food there. But of course, you have to also think in terms of transportation, and glass isn't always good for that.
That's right.
But it's the stuff at home.
But they do come in a case with the dividers already in them, and if you save that case with those dividers in them, you would have to be in a wreck for them to break.
That's true.
But,
those dividers.
Coating that extra weight around in glass. But even when you empty that glass, it has a million uses, all the way from a drinking cup to recanning. With just a couple of lids.
That's right. Yeah.
When I grew up.
Well, good. One other thing I was going to say in terms of saving money, all of these things about saving money, we haven't even gotten into this yet, but I think we probably will at some point, is just talking about the money aspect of this and the economics of debt, personal debt, and being able to have sort of a plan to get there. I'd like to eventually kind of address some of that stuff too.
Yeah.
But this is a huge topic. I'm thinking probably we've talked for about an hour almost now, Paul, haven't we? I think so. Close to, or 50 minutes.
Yeah, well, and we'll take up the subject of food next time, which is, the next thing that you need to think about. And, of course, there's 100 different ways to go, and we might as well start with the cheap way to go and work all the way up to the expensive.
Sure, let's do that. So next time we'll come around, we'll start on food. So I think we'll probably break this one up, and we'll break the next one up too, I'm sure. So looking forward to seeing you guys back on our podcast next time around. And thanks for listening. And we're heading out now. Bye.
Bye.